Hello YouTube! Today in the Naughty Librarian I am doing my mid-July wrap-up. July has started off pretty rocky. I've had some pretty high highs and some pretty low lows. I have 8 books to go over in this wrap-up, and I'll let you know right now, spoiler alert, I DNF'd 3 of them. So like I said, there's been some pretty low lows. I've never DNF'd 3 books in a month before, and I've done it in half of a month so far. And then, you know, there was some okay books, and then there were some actually really good books. And honestly, I think one of the books I've read so far this month might make my, like, best of 2020 list. So, very high highs, very low lows. I got a whole bunch of stuff in between, so let's just get into the reviews. I got a lot of them to do. Let's start off with the good books, and I read 3 of them. You know what? Let's start off with my favorite book I read this month so far, and honestly contender for best books of the year, Dreadnation by Justina Ireland. Oh, I love this so much. It's so good. It's so good. I don't know why I'm so into westerns this year. Maybe just because like 2020 is such like a wasteland of a year that, you know, struggling through like a unfeeling and uncaring world really like hit something different at the moment, but maybe, I don't know, but I'm really into westerns this year for some reason, and Dreadnation gave me everything I could have wanted. This is kind of speculative history, and it takes place in the years after the Civil War. Basically, the Civil War was going on like normal, and then Gettysburg came along. And for those of you who are not in America and do not know, Gettysburg was like one of the biggest battles of the Civil War. And in this one, the dead got back up. So now there's zombies. There are zombies now. It's a Civil War zombie story. And in this world, we're kind of going into, you know, directly post-Civil War era America and throwing zombies into the mix. So there's a lot of things that are somewhat historically accurate, and, you know, then with a splash of zombie. So it's really fun to like see history like rewritten that way. Mainly we're following 2 girls, Jane and Catherine, and they are both black girls. However, Catherine is passing, which comes into play in the story later. And in this world they have like schools where basically they take black people or former slaves, and they send them to these schools where they learn to fight zombies in order to be hired as like bodyguards or attendants by, you know, white families. So that's kind of the world they're living in right now, and we're following, you know, Jane in particular, who kind of is very practical in her like dealings in the world, which I think is why I like relate to her so much. Just the way she sees things, like people are trying so hard to do things, and she's like, okay, well, how's that working out for you? Because they're still zombies, you know? She has this really matter-of-fact tone of speaking, and I like her a lot. And without getting too much into direct plot spoilers, you know, there's Jane and Catherine. They kind of start off as enemies, become friends throughout the story, and they are on a adventure they didn't choose. Things happen, and they get sent to this little town in on the frontier, which isn't as it seems. There is some very deep rot, haha, zombie. That was a pun that I unintended, but I'm gonna stick with it. So there's some deep rot in this civilization, and they're kind of like seeing it come to fruition. And I just really liked it. It's a whole Western vibe, also with zombies. And I really like the characters, Jane and Catherine. They're very polar opposite characters, but they work really well together as friends. And I just enjoyed it. It's really good. Honestly, it's so exciting. There's so much tension that was able to be pulled out of some of these moments where you're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna get caught! And you're like, oh, like my heart. It was so well paced, it felt very action-packed, and I liked the characters, and overall the story, like the setting, the plot, all that stuff is just like a really cool idea. So do I recommend this? Yes, I gave it 5 stars. Honestly, I think it's gonna be on my favorite books of the year list. It's really freaking good. Coming in at 4.75 stars is Felix Ever After by Kacen, Callender. You know what? This was a little bit of a surprise hit. Like, I thought I was gonna like this, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, so I'm very pleasantly surprised. This is a YA contemporary, and we're following Felix, who is, the titular character, and Felix is a trans boy, so he is trying to navigate a world where, being a trans person isn't easy in the world, and it's seeing his struggles in, coming to terms of who he sees himself as, and also how to just navigate other people in a world that doesn't always put his best foot forward and isn't kind, and it's kind of a coming of age story, but with a twist, because this is a trans character and there's a trans character on the cover of this book, so that's a pretty bold statement and I like it. I don't really want to get into too many plot points, but it's about Felix and, coming of age, perhaps falling in love, because Felix just really wants to fall in love and kind of find themselves. They're very much still figuring out who they are and what that means in context of their own gender identity, their own sexuality. Felix is kind of in flux. And I really enjoyed that they let the character be kind of messy. Felix isn't like the perfect trans boy who never makes a mistake. No, Felix is pretty messy. Felix makes lots of mistakes. However, the mistakes that they make seem very logical. Well, it's hard to explain. A lot of the mistakes that get made in this book are based on emotional responses. However, the reasons behind the emotional responses make sense to the character. I've talked about that in a lot of reviews, where if your people are just causing drama for the sake of having drama to push the plot forward, it's not very exciting and it becomes dull and uninteresting. However, if people are having drama because it makes sense for them to have drama, then it's very compelling to read. So this book really does step over into the line of compelling to read. And I had to take off 2.25 stars because there are some things in here that just weren't very believable. There's these kids who all go to art school, and where are their parents? I'm so confused. They're going out at 3 a.m. every night. There's no parental supervision at all. They just drink a lot, and I'm just where are these children's parents? I don't understand. There's none. I'm so confused. I felt like it needed to have more of a parental presence, because it was so weird that these 16, 17-year-old kids are just running wild at 3 a.m. going to Coney Island and meeting up at each other's apartments to have parties. And it's just, what? I don't understand. So I don't know, maybe do teenagers do that? I don't think they do. I mean, it's been a while since I was a teenager, but I don't think I did that. Anyway, so I took off a 1/4 star because I'm that just doesn't ring true. If these were college students, I wouldn't have batted an eye, because then it makes sense for there not to be parental supervision. But it's weird when they have underage characters who would have parents around. It was so glaring that I kept picking up on it, going, where are their parents? And I'm oh my gosh, I'm an adult now. It was those weird coming of age stories for me as a reader. I really, really enjoyed this. I do recommend, and it is about a trans character, which is super cool. There's not a ton of stories about trans characters who are the lead characters, so I recommend. It's very good. Coming in at 4.5 stars, I have Shakespeare for Squirrels by Christopher Moore. And you know what? This is just quirkily delightful. It was just a fun read, and it's also very short. I think it's under 300 pages. Yep, it's 271 pages. It's very short. And I'm kind of biased because I'm a big Christopher Moore fan. I've read literally all of his books, and I really, really like this series in general. This is the 3rd book of it, and the basic gist of the series here is that we're following a fool named Pocket, who is kind of going in and out of different stories of the Shakespeare world in his book. So it's basically Shakespeare that's sarcastic and ridiculous. We've gone through King Lear, we've gone through The Merchant of Venice before, and now here we are in Shakespeare for Squirrels, and we are doing Midsummer Night's Dream. So now we have the fairy characters, we have all of the woodland nonsense going on. Midsummer is just a banana story in general. It's so crisscrossy in magic And it's really like, oh man, Midsummer is like an acquired taste. It's probably one of the most famous plays, but it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I like that the book doesn't try to make sense. It's just like, yeah, this is weird. So, I mean, it's really hard to describe Christopher Moore. It's just ridiculous things and a lot of sarcasm. So if you enjoy that kind of humor, then yeah, you're really gonna like this series. And it was just fun to read. It was quick. I think I didn't read it all in a day because I kind of just fell asleep, but I could have read it all in a day. It's pretty short. And it was fun. I had so much fun with this. There's lots of, creative swears, bawdy tavern songs, and all kinds of fun stuff in here. Shakespeare, sarcasm, ridiculous stuff, Midsummer's Night's Dream, and it's fun. I recommend. 4.5 stars. I took off like half a star because it needs to be longer. It really did. Like, I feel like it needs like an extra 50 pages to make it extra good, because right now I feel like it was a little too brief. I feel like things should have been expounded upon a bit more, because right as it is right now, I feel like it's maybe rushed. It feels a little too fast-paced. It needs some more time to breathe, so that's why I took up half a star. I think it really just needed a few more scenes to kind of drive home some points, but overall super fun and quirky and sarcastic and fun. 4.5 stars. Next, let's talk about the OK books, and I read 2 of those. I read The Last Human by Zack Jordan. I ended up giving this like 3.75 stars in the end because it starts off really strong. Like, honestly, like the first 50% of this book is really good. Like, I was legitimately hooked. And then like it peaked too soon. You know how that is, where the book like it just peaks and it's like, oh, the ending's kind of unsatisfying. This is a sci-fi comedy, I would say kind of a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy-esque type of story, maybe with like a dash of Doctor Who, and it is following Saria, who is the last human. In this universe, humans have basically become extinct because they were so violent and stupid that they were feared and put to extinction. No one wanted to fuck with humans no more. We kind of sucked. Anyway, so Saria is the last human, and she has an adopted mother who is an enormous murder spider. You heard me right. Murder spider. Enormous murder spider. Like, think like, a 7-foot-tall spider who like really likes murder. And that's your mom. And I was obsessed with Spider Mommy. Like, you couldn't tell me nothing. Like, I loved Spider Mommy so much. And the problem is they stop the Spider Mommy storyline too soon. Like, I really wish more of the story was about this mother-daughter relationship, because it is gold. Like, I loved Spider Mommy so much. And there wasn't enough of it. It hits this peak, and then there's not much more Spider Mommy, and then it's turned into this weird, like, metaphysical thing of, like, wormholes and how the universe, like, works and, like, all this stuff, and I'm like, it's honestly too smart for me, but, like, not, because it's also fictional, so I don't really understand half the science in here, but it's fictional science, so, like, do I need to? But overall, it has such a strong start that I really did enjoy it for most of it. It just, by the end, I was like less and less fascinated by it. There's a lot more characters that come into the story later on that I think we're supposed to become endeared to and want to see more from, but they weren't really ever developed enough as Spider Mommy was, and then we got no more Spider Mommy, so I was very like sad about it. I don't know, I think it peaked too soon and it fizzled out. The ending was very metaphysical and time warps and like how the threads of the universe fit together, and it got real sciencey, metaphysical science stuff. I can't even explain it because there's too much to explain, but it got real weird at the end. I think Doctor Who said it best, is that, it's full of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. And that's kind of what the book is full of for the second half, but the first half, excellent. love Spider Mommy. I love the mother-daughter relationship. I love that. So it's one of those weird ones where I'm like, it's a good book on its own. It's just like I liked different aspects of it that weren't like the end goal of the story. So I don't know. I think if you like wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff a la Doctor Who, you might really get into this one. For me, it was just like too much sci-fi because I'm already like so iffy about sci-fi at times that for me it was like too much. But I did enjoy quite a lot of the humor. I think it was kind of well crafted. So I think I would read something else by Zack Jordan in the future. Coming in at 3.5 stars, I have The Deep by River Solomon. I'm always looking for a good mermaid book. And I feel like I should probably just stop looking for one because I never find it. Never find one that's like really satisfying enough for me. And I mean, this one, it made a good effort. It has a really, really cool like concept to it. In this, it's kind of speculative sci-fi kind of story where mermaids are actually descended from the pregnant slaves that were thrown overboard of the ships. And somehow they gave birth while drowning and the babies became mermaids, and it's like this whole thing. We won't get into that, but like that's a cool way to explain mermaids. Like, ooh, like that's really interesting. So you had me hooked. And then I don't know, I think the writing style was just not working for me. Like, I know that it's good and it's written in a really kind of poetic, lyrical way. Like, the words have a sense of like rhythm to them, which makes sense because I think this book was kind of also based around a song. So you get that sense of like rhythm in the writing. However, it's very non-linear and I don't really see what the actual plot of the story was. Like, I get what the moral of the story was, but the actual plot of the story wasn't as exciting because there was so much other stuff going on. Like, I think it needed to focus more. I don't know. I think this might be, it's just not my personal taste, but like, it's still good. Like, I don't think it's a bad book. It just wasn't the book for me. But I do recommend trying it out. I mean, it's a novella. I think it's 170 something pages. It's real short. No, it's 165 pages. You could totally read this in a day. But it's good. It's mermaids. It's a cool concept for mermaids that I'd never seen before. But overall, it was too like non-linear and not, I don't know, I didn't connect to the characters enough. But I thought it was good, so it's kind of in that weird in-between position. So do I recommend? Yes. Did I like it a lot? I liked it, but I didn't love it, kind of thing. Last category is the DNFs, and there's 3 of them. Also by River Solomon, I tried to read An Unkindness of Ghosts. So I had really high hopes for River Solomon. Like, I went all in on this author, and I just don't think their writing style works for me in particular. But not that they're a bad writer. I think as an author, they show a lot of promise, and their writing is very distinct, has this very distinct lyrical quality to it. The imagery that they kind of work their way into the story is very interesting and poetic, and I enjoyed all that. So just on craft alone, I think River Solomon is very talented. For me personally, I just need a little extra spice. I don't know, it feels a little dry, I guess it would be the best way to describe it. The gist of the plot here is that it's a reimagining of the antebellum South, and the antebellum South is the period of the South directly before the Civil War, so not a good period of history, and they're reimagining that but in space. So it's a really cool concept, and we're following Aster, who is a young woman who is a sharecropper, and she's also a doctor. And they never really say it out loud in the book, but I'm fairly certain this character is neurodivergent. She seems that she is on the spectrum. And also, another really cool thing in this book is that it's so far in the future, like the idea of like what gender is very, very different because they've all been locked in this spaceship for so long, and then there's like genetic mutations going on. So there's like some areas of the ship and some groups of people who every child is referred to as female forever until like they decide they want to change it to male. So it's a very different gender dynamic here, and I also like the fact that this is a neurodivergent character So we're seeing kind of the world from her perspective. And that was really, really cool. Like, I thought this had a lot of really great aspects to it. However, it really wasn't very attention grabbing. It was kind of too slow paced. Not enough was going on, and they weren't getting to the point fast enough. So I got to 50% and then I started skimming a bit. Maybe this is just me, but I've never decided to not read a book because I knew something was gonna happen in it. Like, spoilers don't bother me. I'm totally cool skipping around a bit to see if something cool is gonna happen later on, then I'll read to it. So I have a goal. And I wasn't seeing a lot of stuff I wanted to read towards. Frankly, I feel like this should have some trigger warnings in it that I wasn't aware of. I mean, it's the antebellum South. You can assume what may from that. Like, this was not a good time in history to be a woman of color. So I was expecting injustice and violence and even, you know, sexual violence, but the level of sexual violence in here is a bit much. Like, it doesn't necessarily all happen on page, but there's enough that it's too much. I don't know. It depends on the reader, I think. For me, it was very jarring to have like just mentions of sexual violence and how casual it is in their society, that they're like, yeah, I'm probably gonna get raped today. It's a Wednesday, you know. It's always undercurrent, but then it gets like even darker later on, and it was just too much. So I didn't know that going in, and then I skipped around a bit more, and then I saw the ending and I was like, fuck you. Sorry, spoiler alert, it's not a happy ending. And I was like, you were gonna drag me through that whole book with all that misery and not even have a happy ending. Nope. So I gave up. I don't know. I think it's just the writing style doesn't work for me, but it's good. I think the author is definitely very talented. So I think it just depends on the reader, and if you like that type of writing style, then you're really gonna like it, but I don't know, it wasn't for me. I also DNF'd The Silence of Bones by June Her, and this one I'm kind of sad about because I don't know, I think it's just me having the wrong expectations of it, because I really didn't know where this was set before going into it. I didn't know if this was like fantasy or kind of like a make-believe world, but I do believe this is actually set in like early 1800s Korea. And I mean, I know a bit about the history of Korea in that time period, and I think this book is taking place after the whole the saga of Crown Prince Sado. And by the way, if you want to hear a effed up story, Google Crown Prince Sado. It's messed up, but it's that era going on here. So we're following this girl named Sol, and she is basically an indentured servant to the police, and they're trying to solve a murder, and I just wish it was punchier, I guess. It feels very reserved, which is an odd word to use for a book, but I just feel like it's not very punchy, you know? It needs to be punched up and have some more action happening, and like the character needs a bit more spice in their personality, because right now everything's just kind of at this like level that's a little reserved. I don't know a better word for it. But the other side of that coin is that this is early 1800s Korea. Like, it would be completely unrealistic if it was really punched up and these characters were like sassy. Like, it wouldn't work for the time period and it would be ridiculous. So it's my own reading taste kind of failing me here. Like, I like a little bit more pizzazz in my books, especially when they're fiction, because it's fiction. You can make it up. But for the time period and the setting this takes place in, it wouldn't work for the story. So I think this might just be me and my own reading taste not really aligning here. But if you're interested in Korean history or a murder mystery that's kind of slow paced a bit and, you know, kind of slow burn, then I think you'd be into this. For me personally, like nothing made me want to read it, honestly. Like, I know I had to read it. Like, I'm like, oh, I should read some of this today, so I'll finish it. And then I look at it and be like, nope, YouTube. And like, I couldn't make myself read it. So I just was very bored but it's a me problem, I think. I don't really think the book was poorly written or anything. It's just not what I was excited about. The last book I DNF'd so far this month is Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson. And I know a lot of people warned me before I started reading this, like, oh boy, good luck. Like, a lot of people warned me off. But I was like, maybe it's good. I'm gonna give it a shot. And I think I get what the problem is here. Before we get into that, the basic idea of the story here, we're following Jesse and Carrie, and Jesse's foster mom, adopted mom, owned this knitting shop, and it was like a staple of the community, and the mother passes away before the story begins, kind of unexpectedly, and now Jesse, his brothers, and this girl Carrie, who kind of grew up alongside them, are all trying to figure out what to do with this knitting shop. And Jesse wants to keep it going in his mother's honor. And so as Jesse and Carrie kind of in close proximity, having to work together, they've grown up together, they've kind of had crushes on each other, and then, you know, romance, essentially. And I really try to put any biases away here, because I don't want to judge this book unfairly for things that are, frankly, in a lot of books. And is always very problematic. But sometimes I'm able to overlook those problematic things if something's happening plot-wise. The problem here is that there's a lot of problematic stuff, but no plot to distract me from it. So it's just all of the things that are like really problematic are just blaringly obvious because there's nothing to distract me from the problems. So yeah, it's real slow burn. I read to 50% and then I started skimming a bit, and I was just thoroughly unsatisfied with what I was seeing happening. It's very slow burn. I don't see any real chemistry between the characters besides like, ooh, Jesse is hot. And then Jesse's like, ooh, Carrie's hot. And then like they're both kind of nice. Like, I think that's the basis of their relationship. I don't see a lot of like sparks here. And so it was hard to root for them when I don't see something worth rooting for. And also, like, let's just talk about like internalized misogyny for a minute, because it's in a lot of books, but this one doesn't have the plot to distract me from it. There's like this whole thing of Jesse being kind of a womanizer. He sleeps around, he's got girls all over town, and like he has this constant like internal monologue saying like, oh, I'm not good enough for anybody, like why do I do this, I know it's bad. And it's just like, if you know it's fucking bad, stop doing it, you fuckwit. Like, it would just make me mad. Like, if you know something doesn't work and you're ashamed of it, stop fucking doing it. Like, what is your problem? Like, I don't understand. And then Carrie is just made of, I'm not like other girls. Like, that's her whole personality. And she is kind of casually has this internalized misogyny toward other women. Like, women who are wearing something, you know, revealing or attractive, she kind of looks down upon. And it's just like, what? And it's not even like always like a jealousy thing, like, oh, this other girl's with Jesse, so now I hate her because she's with a guy I like, which is irrational but like understandable. No, this is like her best friend, and she's like, oh, she's wearing tight pants, and it's just like, she's your best friend, like, you suck as a friend, frankly. So it's these two characters that have repeating internal monologues, like, to the point where it's just like, oh my gosh, if you think you're a bad person, stop doing the things that make you a bad person. Why don't you learn? Like, so it's just like repeating that mantra over and over and over again throughout the book, and it's just stupid. Like, I don't understand how they just don't stop doing the things that make them sad. Like, dogs could figure that out. I don't get it. And I didn't see the relationship working. I tried to look for smut. I'm like, hey, maybe there's some top-notch smut in here. Honestly, nope. It's kind of a fade to black, and I was very disappointed. So, yeah, I mean, if it had like a really exciting plot and it was kind of funny and maybe like kind of sexy, I could overlook more of the problematic, you know, thematic content here. But the problem is there's no plot. There's nothing happening. It's two people walking around a store saying, should we buy a table? Oh, maybe. Oh, here's some yarn. It's like literally nothing's going on. So it's just like nothing is there to distract me from the obvious problems. And I think that's why the book is failing. But, like, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily the author who doesn't know how to write. I think their editor did them dirty. Why did no one tell them that? Fix it. There's a lot of repetitive things. There's a lot of problematic content. There's not enough stuff going on. Like, why didn't anyone catch this in the editing process? I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe I try something else from the author if they get a better editor, frankly. But yeah, woo, it just has problems and no plot, which is sad. So yeah, high highs and low lows this first half of July. I also blew through most of my TBR again. This has been like a habit I've done for the past few months where I read like all of my TBR in the first half of the month, and in the second half of the month I don't know what I'm gonna read. Also, hey, on Saturday, July 25th, 2020, over on Leanna's Library, we're doing the next live show for the Blades and Bodice Rippers book club. We're going to be discussing Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I am so excited. I hope you guys can tune in on Leanna's channel and join in the discussion. I'm excited. It's going to be like a fantasy epic, so it should be a fun discussion. Come join us, chat. It'll be great. It's going to be at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, so it's perfect time for like brunch. You can sleep in. Come chat about books. It's gonna be great. But moving on, let me know in the comments down below, how has your first half of July been? Like, mine has been all over the place, kind of rough, but kind of good. I don't know, it's been all over. How's your reading month going so far? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye!